Hi, I'm Shana Meyerson with the Yoga of War podcast, here today with October 7th archivist Itay Ken-Tor and survivor Adele P. Raemer. If you appreciate and find value in these important discussions, please consider supporting the show so I can continue to bring you such amazing and esteemed guests. Details are pinned in the comments below. It's International Holocaust Memorial Day, and every year we cry out, we remember and never forget. And yet, it seems our memory has failed us, and far too many have forgotten. Forgotten the dark history of the past and forgotten the lessons that we're meant to carry civilization into the future. Most people before October 7th, 2023, even most Jews, most Israelis, and most Zionist activists would have said that we live in a largely post-anti-Semitic age, an era where Jews are accepted across Western society and even celebrated for our tremendous contributions. That's what the Jews of Vienna and Warsaw and Berlin thought in 1937. After 10/7, we lost that luxury. And today we have to fight for people to never forget the events of just 2 years ago. We implore people to remember the atrocities that happened in Israel on that Simchat Torah Shabbat, a day that should have been one of pure joy and celebration, but instead plunged Israel and the Jewish people into a new and very dark era of global Jew hatred, simply unimaginable just a few years earlier. Today, you become the witness. As Edut 710's Itay Ken-Tor and October 7th survivor Adele P. Raemer talk about what really happened that horrific day and how we can all help to ensure that the world never forgets. Itay, Adele, thank you both so much for joining me for this very important episode.
Thank you for
having me.
To start off, Itay, can you tell me about your Edut 710 and SUFA projects?
Yeah, I'll say briefly that Edut is testimony in Hebrew, and of course 710 is October 7. And it's an initiative that was launched on October 9th, 2 days after the massacre, by a group of volunteers coming from different professions, different films. I'm a filmmaker, and I produced the films for Yad Vashem Museum and also other documentaries related to the Holocaust. So this day is very special for me, because I was involved with the Holocaust remembrance on the screen. And knowing the importance of the testimony for the survivors as part of the recovery process, we understood that our role on October is to enable every person who experienced this attack from firsthand, every survivor who were in West Negev in the same day, is entitled to tell his story in his own voice for him as part of the recovery process and for future generations. So immediately we thought about our children, our grandchildren, and how they will be able to learn what happened on the same day. And then since then, we, by a group of 400 volunteers, were able to capture more than 1,800 testimonies and to upload about 1,000 of them already to the designated website, mostly in Hebrew to this point. And we upload every testimony in both versions, in the short version of 4 to 6 minutes, which can give you a sense of the testimony and the story, and the original length of the testimony, which can be 40 minutes and can be also 3 hours. And SOFA project is one specific project that we did, which actually were invited, or the communities, to tell their stories. Most of the people in the West Negev were sitting in a safe room, and they did not know what happened outside. And the communities came to us and said, "Okay, help us understand what's our story," because they don't always have the time to talk to each other, understand the full scale and aspects of the story. And we created an interactive platform which tells a community story by the local squads and civilians that were out fighting. And in this project, we combined on-site testimonies along with 360 footage and drone footage and real-time footage from civilian cameras or for the body cameras of the fighters or the Hamas. And we created a project that you can follow the events from a multi-perspective by the time and by the geographical map, and then have a short clips of what happened in every place.
I'm curious, before we actually take a walk through the websites, do you have plans to have these translated into English and other languages?
Yeah, sure. Our immediate response was to take the testimonies, but we understand that it's a crucial tool for fighting anti-Semitism, because it's the real testimony, real stories, authentic stories. So we were able to translate 100 short testimonies to English and to other 5 languages, to Arabic, Spanish, German, French, and Russian. And we plan eventually to translate all the testimonies, both short and long, um, in the for English and hopefully also to other languages. I
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
I'd add another thing, that another layer of what we're doing, or 2 layers, is we're creating a digital archive with the Hebrew University, in which we use AI tools and other tools in order to enable the viewer to ask any questions that they want about the testimonies. Either what is the most common word of the survivors of Nirim, or how people in Nirim are testifying differently than other people, and also when people are silent. So it's analyzed both the video and the text, and ideally it will be open to everyone, and that's why it's important also to be translated to English.
Yeah. I just want to say, as a side note, that this podcast that you're watching, the Yoga of War podcast, I had 2 choices. One was to create its own podcast, and the other was to embed it on my yoga site, where I already had tens of thousands of followers. And I opted to put it on the website, on my yoga site, because I wanted it to reach not necessarily the people who wanted to hear it, but the people who needed to hear it. And that's why Hebrew language, these are the people who want to hear it. But I think that once it expands into every language, which obviously you're in the process of, it gives access to the people who need to hear it. And there are so many who need to hear it right now.
Sure,
So
it's everything is matter of scale of work and finances and ability of doing with volunteers, and now but it's on our scale for this year, on our plan for this year, to enlarge the amount of
Nachon.
testimonies in English.
And it's in the show notes how people can donate to you. So I want to encourage people to do that, to help keep this project moving. And we'll revisit that at the end of the podcast. So Itay, can you walk us through both sites to show us like how this immersive experience unfolds for the user?
Yeah. So I'll say that the basic, okay, the basic website is both in Hebrew and English. And when you enter, of course, you can switch language if it's between Hebrew and English. If you understand Hebrew, you'll have a bigger variety of testimonies. At first, you'll see the community project, the Civilian at War, which you can click. I'll show it in a minute. And then you have a selection of testimony. You can also search by location or by name if you're looking for a specific testimony. And on the lower part, you have categories, and you have also a map in which you can see the amount of testimonies that were uploaded from each point and community along the border in the west of the West Negev. In Hebrew, of course, it's much more because we have 1,000 uploaded and not only 600. And then you can click to, and you can either ask for us to come and take your testimony, of course, or you can look directly on the map or switch to all testimonies. Oops, something happened. I don't know what. Yeah,
there's
okay.
a few pages that
That's
hit
fresh.
that.
Okay, I'll check. And this is the Civilian It's War project. The first one that we made, we filmed 6 of them. The first one that we published is Sufa. Sufa is a kibbutz, a small kibbutz, small community on the southern part of the Gaza Strip or the Gaza envelope. And so you can have some background of that about the kibbutz, and then you have an opening video which shows you have an opening video that shows what happened on the same day in the kibbutz.
בבוקר שבת, ה-7 באוקטובר 23, התעורר...
I don't know why it didn't switch to English. Okay. It has English translation anyway. And then you have 1 minute background about the kibbutz, and you can get to know the people who saved the kibbutz and fought outside.
אלה האזרחים מקיבוץ סופה שנלחמו לבדם מול עשרות מחבלי חמאס. אליה נתן לוינטל, בן 25.
And then after the introduction, you can go down, and then you have the map of the kibbutz with the different places where the events took at 6/28. And then you can watch short video about what happened at the same time.
ב-6:30 בבוקר מהאזעקות. ואני שולח הודעה לתושבים, להיכנס למרחבים מוגנים, כבר רגילים.
We don't have time to see everything, but that's the idea. And then when you move down by the hour, by the time, you can see where there are some places, when there are some stories took place on the same time, so you can look for more stories. You can look at the map and click the drone footage, and you can see the actual place, how it looks like. And you can also click on 360 footage and then see again from the ground level how the kibbutz, the place that they are talking about, looks like. And then you follow the time, and you can see how the events move from one place to the other. You have also quotes of the people, of the testimony of the people, and in the end, you have a section of commemoration of the people who died in the same community. So you can see the idea. What's is most important for us, both in the interactive platform and in our archive in general, is to reflect multi-perspective, not to have only heroism or horror stories, just to have really a big variety of testimonies from all the places and all the aspects of the event.
Amazing. So Holocaust Remembrance Day exists because the world once failed to document and believe Jewish suffering in real time. What lessons from that failure most directly shaped how Edut 710 was built?
First of all, the importance of having testimonies. I mean, we follow the tradition of Professor Dori Lab, who was the first one to take testimonies of Holocaust survivors. His archive Fortune of Archive in Yale University, and of course, after him, Yad Vashem and Spielberg Shaw Foundation project. But they came to take testimonies dozens of years after the events, and we understood it's important on almost real time. So the first testimony was already taken on October 9th, and quite a few on October 10th and October 11th, and hundreds were taken in November 23. And the website was already up in the air on November 23, because one of them, 2 other things that we learned from the Holocaust survivors' testimonies. First, most of them were buried in archive, and it's not enough to give recognition to the story by listening to testimony. The idea is to make these testimonies available and known and make other people hear the story and not to have it buried in the archive. In order to do so, we developed this method of editing a short testimony, a short sense of the testimony, so 4 to 6 minutes, because people will not sit and listen to hundreds of hour testimony. So they can grasp a wider perspective when they listen to the short testimony and decide if they want to listen to the long one. So and the idea that the last thing is that it's not enough to document. You have to be occupied with distributing the testimonies and make people know about them and make people use them as a tool for education and for combating anti-Semitism and so on.
Do you see this project as most vitally a historical archive or as an act of resistance against erasure that's happening in real time?
The basic motivation is humanity, because the terror attack was a terror attack against humanity. And by listening to people, we want to bring back the value of being human. And by asking people to listen to the testimony, if you'll see in our website, it's rough editing, jump cuts. It's neither no visuals, no music. We ask people to give the respect to the survivors and listen to them. So the main goal was to take a human act. But we understand the importance for the archive for us and for future generation, and also for people outside Israel. So there are many layers to what we're doing.
Because of the nature of trauma, I have to be honest, it's a little shocking to me that people were ready to give testimony just 2 days after the events. Adele, I'm curious, when and why did you decide to add your voice to Edut 710?
So first of all, since I'm talking from another device, can you maybe spotlight me? Because otherwise my picture pops up and not my live self.
It's actually on a gallery view.
Okay, great. So I have been doing public diplomacy for a long time. It's sort of a weird hobby, if you want to call that. And when I personally was evacuated from my house on October 8th, we were told to grab to take a suitcase and that we were going to Eilat. We didn't know how long for. I took a little trolley, threw all sorts of inappropriate clothing that I had at hand into the suitcase. But what I grabbed was my computer, my laptop, and my camera, because I knew also instinctively that grabbing these stories is so important. So I think I gave my own story to myself, like I recorded my own story within 2 days. And from the first week, from the first few days that we were in Eilat, in the hotel, I was inviting people to my hotel room and recording these stories as well, of course, without the professional stuff and everything, but I knew that you have to grab them. So it took, it took a few weeks for Edut to get to me, for Edut 710. I honestly don't remember. There are a lot of things in that timeline that I don't remember. So I don't remember when they came to me. But as soon as they came to me, I said, of course, yes. And I gave my testimony in English and in Hebrew, I think possibly even 3 times. Because I understand the importance of bearing witness for history, for the future, but also as a part of my own healing process, which is why I'm always, anytime that anybody asks me if I could host them on Nirim or do a Zoom or tell a story, and I've been abroad 8 times since October 7th, I say yes.
Right.
Because because I understand how important it is.
It's so interesting to me that, oh, sorry, Itay.
If I may add, Adele took testimonies of her community, and the first correspondent that we have, Adele, if you remember, you said me, I have a drive with, I think, 20 or 24 testimonies that I already filmed. So she had the instinct to take the testimonies much before she met Edut 710.
That's amazing. And it is amazing, Adele, that you were ready to speak about that right away. I mean, personally, I could only imagine, or I would say begin to imagine how traumatic what you experienced on October 7th really was. And we'll get into that shortly. But I think about Holocaust survivors who literally live or lived out their entire lives unable to talk about the horrors that they endured. When you tell your story, is it hard or is it healing? Is it a little bit of both? Has it changed over time? What do you experience when you go back and retell these events?
As I said, for me, it's healing. It's hard because I dive into it and I tell it with all my heart and with all my, I'm there again. When I'm telling the story, I am there. And when I'm talking about the different stories about my friend Judy, I am there. So it's hard, it's draining, but as I said, I think it's part of what's helped me come to grip with the whole thing, because it's just so inconceivable. You know, people say, I can't imagine how you lived through that. And I say, I can't either. And I lived through it. So it's all a part of the process, and it's an important process. And you can't compare it to what the Holocaust survivors went through, because
100%.
It was a different period of time, and it was a different mentality. And people who survived that, years of living through the Holocaust, whereas for us it was a day, for them it was years, and it was embarrassing. People were embarrassed to talk about it from the Holocaust, whereas from October 7th, there are some people who are embarrassed of what happened, the way they reacted, who feel that they have regrets that they didn't do this and they didn't do that. But I think for the most part, people are so much more willing to talk about it today, because we are in 2026 now.
Yeah, and everybody has a personal news channel in their pocket that we've gotten very used to using. So, Adele, before I get back to Itay, I want to sort of posit a question to you and actually to Itay as well, because I think this is very important. We've had so many Holocaust analogies made in not the least of which is the fact that the three of us chose to specifically have this discussion on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. That's not random. But is there a danger or perhaps a disservice in creating moral equations between the Holocaust and October 7th? You alluded to it, but could we expound on how you each feel about this?
So October 7th, the major difference is that October 7th happened to us in our country when we have an army of our own that was supposed to be guarding us, supposed to be keeping us safe, as opposed to in the Holocaust, where people felt that they were assimilated into their countries. They felt that they were part of citizens like any other citizen, and then they were betrayed by the other citizens of their country.
I absolutely agree with Adele, and I'll add that it's very different from Holocaust. I heard a lot of Holocaust survivors, and we shouldn't compare. But many survivors talk about the Holocaust in the testimony because it's the only extreme traumatic terms that we know to express such a traumatic event. So if people want looking for analogy, so that they bring up the Holocaust. But and I also add that there is a very, very specific group of people who are Holocaust survivors who were living in the West Negev on the same day, and they experienced, in a way, another traumatic events which they hope they will never experience. And this is why I feel it's relevant to this day today. In Israel, there is a big separation between the Holocaust and October 7th. But I understand that in many places around the world, it's Holocaust remembrance and tolerance, so Holocaust and other atrocities. I mean, I was in the state in some museum and understand they're not only focused in the Holocaust, and in a way, and we also work with the Holocaust Department of Stand With Us, who use our testimonies. And I think that in a way, it makes the Holocaust closer to the people today, because young people today, the Holocaust, which happened 60, 80 years ago, is far memory, is one part of the history, and having this traumatic event, they can relate it together to anti-Semitism, and I think that's what I experienced that happens in the state, in the places I visited.
Yeah, and I think that your connections and I assume, not assume, you've told me testimonies from Holocaust survivors, and the confluence of these events has to have been somewhat overwhelming in a lot of ways, not just for you as a documentarian, but also for the survivors themselves. I mean, many Holocaust survivors once believed that their suffering would never need to be explained again. And as they watch the post-October 7th tsunami of Jew hatred unleash, like, from your personal vantage point, how are they absorbing this? I try so hard to get into their shoes, and my soul just gets crushed more and more when I try to conceptualize what it is to go through this process all over again. How is this, like, on a broader scale, affecting them emotionally and psychologically?
Adele, do you want to refer?
The Holocaust survivors who are reliving in many ways these horrors.
Most of them are old. I mean, the Holocaust survivors that we took, we have 95, 85, they're very old. And most of them that I listened to the testimonies, I did not take testimonies of them personally, but the testimonies that I heard, they stand up on the distinguish between the Holocaust and October 7th. And of course, it's horrible, they're not all of them experienced the same trauma on the same day because they were living in different places. But the idea of having such an anti-Semitism and denial right after the event is very difficult. I guess that for them more than the others, but because they experienced it.
So, when I was a child growing up in New York, we used to watch Hogan's Heroes,
right,
which was a satire, a comedy about American soldiers that were in German prison camps, and so I used to play pretend. Where would I hide if the Nazis came to get me? Behind the door, in the cupboard. On October 7th, that's what was happening. I never would have dreamed that I would be in that situation in my own country, in my own home, in my own kibbutz. But that's what we were doing on October 7th, hiding from the Nazis of 2023.
Yeah. I mean, these are games that no child should have to play. I have to say, I mean, also, Itay, when I was looking at the first three videos in the Sufa, before things were unfolding, as Israelis, it's just taken as a matter of course that you have to have civilian armed guards in order simply to exist. This is not normal. This is not normal, and people don't understand what it means to be, I mean, literally living on a border with terrorists on the other side. Adele, in 2011, you started your Facebook group, which is now more than 16,000 members strong. Life on the Border with Gaza, things people may not know but should. What would you say are the most important things people may not know about life on the border with Gaza but should?
That any child who lives here knows that as soon as they start hearing the incoming rocket warning, the words in Hebrew that say Tseba Adom, code red, that they have 0 to 10 seconds to get to someplace safe. You know, we had incoming rocket warnings when Iran was shooting their ballistic rockets. And I was on Ruchama, where my granddaughters were at the time, my granddaughters who survived October 7th. And at that time, we knew that we have, like, for the Iranian ballistic missiles, we have a pre-warning, and we have, like, you had, like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, and then another warning, and then you had another 10 minutes. As soon as they heard, my granddaughters, as soon as they heard that warning on the phones, they were there. They were in the safe room. They didn't,
Right.
It's an instinct, an inborn instinct that they know that when you hear an alarm, you don't think twice, you run.
And again, living with red alerts is not a normal thing. I'm curious, Adele, we are going to get into your personal testimony, but I do want to take this time to set the stage for both your testimony and continue to look into the Edut 710 project because it's so important. But Adele, I'm curious, how, if at all, like, has your view of your neighbors across the border in Gaza changed since October 7th?
I think everybody in Israel has taken, no matter where they were on October 6th, I think everybody in Israel has taken a step or two to the right. I certainly have. I was in contact with people from Gaza. I did educational activities with people from Gaza before October 7th. I don't believe that any of the Gazans that I was in touch with were the terrorists. And I do believe that, you know, I've taken countless groups on tours in my kibbutz before October 7th. And I always used to end up at the Western Gate and tell people, I'm sure that the vast majority of people that live on the other side of that fence just want the same thing that I do. Safety for their children, food on their table. As of October 7th, I think I got my numbers wrong. So I think there are still people on the other side that would like to be good neighbors, that would like to be able to live in peace with us, but far fewer than I originally thought, because the Hamas have done such an excellent job of educating generations to hate us, to know that, to grow up believing that the greatest thing that they can aspire to is to be a shaheed, to be a martyr. So that's how I have changed. I can't, you know, people have asked me, are you going to go back to doing these activities with Palestinians, with people from Gaza? And I tell them, it's still too early. We're still in the survival mode. We're still in healing mode.
Yeah.
we're talking on the first day since 2014 that there haven't been any hostages in Gaza. This is a very significant day. And that's not that 12 years, that it takes a while it's going to take a while to get back to trusting, to believing, to know who to trust and who to believe in, to be willing to talk and change the way I look at them now.
Yeah.
You know,
Itay?
you were asking of one of the things that people don't know but should.
Yes.
So for example, I forgot that I have this right near me. What I'm showing you now is a map, a warning in Arabic. These were one of the leaflets that the IDF threw from planes over Gaza during the war, before they would go into certain areas, to warn civilians to clear those areas out, because the areas were about to be attacked, because there were Hamas operatives there, or Hamas military bases there. This arrived on our front lawn. That's how close we are.
you are.
That's how close. The wind brought this right over to us.
Yeah, try not to move, because when it moves, it's just blurred. Yeah. Amazing.
It's just a map in Arabic saying warning.
Yeah. Which also shows one of the many steps that the IDF took to mitigate civilian casualties on the other side. Itay, I want to, before we move forward with Adele's testimony, I don't want to move away from the Holocaust denial thing yet, because it's so relevant. Holocaust denial took literally decades to take hold. The first time I became aware of it was my senior year in college, 1992, when a Holocaust denier named Bradley Smith, I can still remember it, took out a full-page infiltrated or whatever it's called, advertorial, in the Cornell Daily Sun, claiming that the Holocaust never happened, and presented as an article. This concept had never crossed my path before then, and of course that was more than 4 decades after the Holocaust actually finished. October 7th denial appeared and was widely accepted almost instantly, despite the fact that so much of the footage was taken by Hamas themselves. What does this say about the information ecosystem that we're living in now, and how dangerous it really is?
I'm a filmmaker, and I teach filmmaking and communication, and we're absolutely in a very challenging era, which is attack about truth. And it's very difficult to understand what is truth and what is not. One of the films that I produced called The Film Unfinished, and it was about the Nazi film that was shot in Warsaw Ghetto 1 month before the deportation. And we created, and this film is used in all the museums and every film that is talking about Warsaw Ghetto. And in this film that we made, The Film Unfinished, we show how what seems to be a documentary was staged by the Nazis, and how they created like a film set in the ghetto. This film was won an editing award at Sundance and was nominated for the Emmy. I'm saying that because it's not new. I mean, the challenge of truth basically is many years we're facing, but now it's really, really a crucial time because of social media, because of AI, of course, that you create almost everything. And it's very challenging. I really don't know, as a human being, or as a citizen of the world, where the world is going to, it's challenging. But our answer is the scale. The fact that we don't take 10, 20, 30 testimonies, but we aim to take at least 10,000 testimonies and to create this archive which will enable really to ask any questions and to make any linkage between their testimonies and other material and news and reports and text. And so we believe that the scale and technology will breathe a proof that what about the stories that really happened. Whether people will want to know the truth, I don't know. I just had a meeting with a person from Miami. He's leading an organization who's fighting anti-Semitism and saying nobody is interested in the facts. It's only about emotions. So it's challenging, but the fact that it's challenging doesn't mean that we have to stop trying. I mean, and it's I think it's you have to work on education, we have to work on regulation, we have to work on publication. We have many as a citizens and communication people have a lot of work to do.
So how do you balance these considerations? This is a very important talking point that people have to understand, is that the Hamas propaganda has been depending on emotional imagery, much of which is fabricated. It's not even real, wherein it puts Israel on a back footing where we wind up with what we would call hasbara, which is explaining it away with statistics and facts. And the emotional part of the brain and the statistical part of the brain are two separate parts of the brain. I'm curious, like, so how, or do you, it sounds like the way that you're taking the testimonies just allows people to sort of say whatever they want to say, the way they want to say it, without any editing or images or anything being added in. So how do you go about archiving the truth in a world where sorry, now I'm tripping up my words, my thoughts, where lies are traveling so much faster and they feel so much more emotionally satisfying than facts?
So our goal, I like to resemble what we're doing to Lego. We create the Lego part. And our role is to go to everyone who was there and get his experience and his own story. And we make it publicly open and accessible to the public in order to other people to tell the story. I mean, we can do everything on the same time. And we're not interested to this point to create the narratives. Our mission is to bring all the parts, and everyone is more than welcome to use the testimonies with permission and with the proper process, but to use them to explain and to make the hasbara or propaganda if they want. Okay, but it's out there. It's in YouTube. It's on the website. It's out there. People. That's why we want people to use it.
Yeah. So this is the perfect lead-in. Adele, we've spoken about memory, we've spoken about denial, we've spoken about the importance of testimony. So I want to pause now in this discussion and ask you to bear witness. So can you walk us through your experiences of October 7th?
Of course. And as Itay says, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of stories. And that, in my mind, is the most shocking part of this whole thing. Because if you've heard one story, you've just heard one story. And there are so many other stories to hear. And when I'd speak to people and they'd say, no, nothing special happened to me, I asked them, was there a period of time on October 7th that you thought, this is it, this is the end of my life? Today's the day that I'm going to die? Everybody said yes. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am and a little bit background of the kibbutz and my October 7th story and where we are today and how we're moving forward from it. We like to call the place where I live 95% heaven, because it truly was heavenly 95% of the time. Perfect place to raise children, no pollution, no crime. I don't even lock my door when I leave my house. My neighbors go abroad, they don't lock their doors. 95% heaven until October 7th, and then that flipped to 100% hell. And I like to start my October 7th story with 3 of my 8 delicious grandchildren. And these 3 that you see here, Zivraz and Yuval, in the picture, they're ages 2, 6, and 8, were born here on Nirim and grew up here. And this picture was taken in the pomegranate grove of Kibbutz Nir Oz, which is just about a mile and a half away from us, on September 29th, 2023, just days before the entire region was overrun with bloodthirsty terrorists. So Kibbutz Nirim, October 6, 2023, were 430 residents, founded in 1946, were based on agriculture. Community is something that's very important to us. And we've always been financially self-sufficient. Absorption and growth is something that we invest in because it's all about that. It's all about community builds resilience, and resilience is the name of the game. And we absorbed 200 people since 2014, when 2 people from my community were killed in the middle of the community on the very last day of the war. And we absorbed 6 families in September 2023 alone. And building community means doing things together, celebrating holidays together, going on trips together. As for myself, I was born in the States. I was in a Zionist youth movement. I came on a year program, 1972-73. 73, I went back to the States to go to university, like all good Jewish girls do. And October 73, the Yom Kippur War broke out. So I said, what am I doing in the States? Israel needs me. And that's when I made an aliyah to Kibbutz Keturah. I was immediately drafted into the army because it was wartime. And that's how I arrived on Kibbutz Nirim as part of my army service. I'm a mother or a grandmother. I was a teacher for 38 years of English and digital pedagogy and a teacher trainer. I'm a trained medical clown who unfortunately from October 7th was comatose. I could not put my nose on and said, I can't go back into a hospital to make other people happy until the last hostage comes home. And I call myself an unwitting war correspondent because of the way I deal with traumas and when stuff happens here, I can't just evacuate. I can't just do other things. I have to talk about it and write about it and blog about it and give interviews because the world has to know. Because as we said, it takes 2 minutes for denial to start happening. And therefore, I've been doing public diplomacy, as I said, as an unusual hobby for quite a while. So October 6th was our kibbutz's anniversary. And we were 77 years old, and we had a beautiful big celebration. My daughter was in charge of the cultural activities. The children were in charge of the food, and we had lots of visitors. We had free food, live music, bouncy castles. It was a glorious celebration. And many of the people who came to celebrate with us also stayed over, which was very impactful for them the next day. One of the visitors that we had was one of my sons, who does not live here, and he came for the celebrations. And I told him, if you don't see me in the morning, don't worry. I'm planning on taking my camera because I'm an amateur photographer. I wanted to take my camera, go out before sunrise, and catch this field of squills at sunrise, like my friend Itay did just the day before. So thank God I was too tired on October 7th to get up at 6:30 in the morning. Because if I hadn't been too tired, sorry, at 5:30 in the morning, because if I hadn't been too tired, I would not be sitting here and talking to you today. 6:29, we start getting massive incoming rocket warnings. As I said before, we have 0 to 10 seconds from the second you hear that alarm starting to the second you hear the explosion. 0 to 10 seconds to get to someplace safe. I ran to my safe room. Every house within 7 kilometers of the border has to have a safe room. Every structure has to have a safe room, and a safe room is just like a little bedroom with reinforced concrete walls and ceiling. It has a special iron sleeve on the window that you pull closed in time of rocket fires so that shrapnel doesn't enter through the window, and it has a heavy iron door that you pull closed and click. And when you click it, there are prongs that go into the frame of the door that prevent the door from being blown open if the house is impacted by a rocket elsewhere. So I ran into my safe room where my son was already, because it's also my guest room. And immediately we realized that this was something different, because what would usually happen, what typically happens when there's incoming rockets, you get one alert, you get another alert, you wait 10 minutes. Of course, within 10 seconds, you hear the explosion. You wait till you hear all the explosions. You're supposed to wait 10 minutes. You don't usually even wait that long. Once you hear the explosion, you open the door and you get on with your day. It was incessant. The incoming rockets didn't stop, and there was no information coming through on regular channels. We have a TV in our room, and we could see the pop-ups on the TV that pop up on any TV in Israel when there's incoming rockets, that shows the name of the community that's being targeted. And we could see that the entire side of the screen was full of communities north of Tel Aviv till south of us that were being targeted by these incessant rockets. And we understood that this was something different. It was only afterwards that I realized that these rockets were just camouflage for the main event that was going on just about a mile away from my house, along the border, in 119 different spots along the border, at the very same time, where thousands of terrorists were infiltrating. We start getting messages through our incoming, through our phones from our internal messaging service, saying, people were saying that they could hear shouting outside in Arabic, they could hear gunfire, and a little bit before that, the only official message that we had gotten was from our head of security, who sent a message saying, Israel has been invaded. It's going to take the army, go lock your doors and your windows, and then go back inside and lock your safe room door. The only problem with that is that the safe room doors don't lock. We were forbidden from having a lock on our safe room doors because they were built to keep us safe from rockets. Nobody ever thought of infiltration. And the thinking was, if you lock yourself in your safe room and you have a medical emergency, the emergency crews won't be able to come in and help you. So the only way to keep the safe room locked to any extent was by physically pulling down on that handle and just hoping and praying that whoever's on the other side of that door isn't stronger than you are. And we start getting messages from people within the community. As I said, we're 430 people in the community. I know everybody. I know where they live. We're seeing messages with people saying, we hear shooting outside. We hear Arabic outside. People are entering our homes. They're setting our homes on fire. Where's the army? Where are the police? Where are the fire? Where are the people that are supposed to be coming to save us? Crickets. And after a while, my son and I start hearing shooting outside, and we start hearing Arabic outside. And I'm sitting on the bed, as you can see in this picture, trying to keep track of what's going on through my phone, because that was the only information we were getting. The TV was on at first, but then when they started showing pictures of what was happening, pictures that they said were from Sderot, of people in pickup trucks, in white pickup trucks with weapons. I said, this is fake news. This is Pakistan. This can't be Sderot. And I turned it off. So we're sitting in our safe room, and we hear the terrorists outside the safe room window. I hear sounds of breaking. I hear Arabic. My son, who understands a little bit Arabic, says, they're saying, come here. And we didn't understand what that was about, but I looked at my son, he looked at me. We told each other that we loved each other and basically said goodbye. I was sure I was not going to see another sunrise. I was sure this was the end of the Zionist project. I was sure Israel was going to be finished that day, that the Hezbollah would be attacking from the north, that the terrorists would be attacking from the east, from the sea, from the south. That was it. After a while, things started to quiet down, and I had to go to the bathroom. There's no running water in the safe room. There's no toilet. So I opened the safe room door as quietly as I could. And when I did, I saw the window opposite the safe room, and that the slats had been broken. So the noises that we had heard from within our safe room were terrorists on my front porch trying to open the door, starting to break through the window, and then being called away. What for, we'll never know, whether it was dumb luck or divine intervention or my late husband looking over us. Whatever it was, they moved on. Around the same time, unbeknownst to me, my son-in-law's house was being infiltrated. And my son-in-law and my daughter were separated already at this time. She was in her own home, in her safe room, hiding under the bed, scrunched up in the corner. In front of her, she put blankets and pillows and stuffed animals so that when the terrorists come in, hopefully they wouldn't see her. My son-in-law was one of the first responders, so he had a weapon. He was in the safe room with my 3 granddaughters. He heard the sounds of the terrorists entering his house. He told the children, hide under the covers. You're going to hear a loud noise. Don't make any sounds. No matter what happens, don't come out from under the covers. I'm here. He waited until he saw the handle of his safe room door starting to move. He kicked open the safe room door and shot the terrorist right in front of the safe room door. He started going after another 2 terrorists that were in the house, but then realized that there were many highly armed terrorists just outside and that he didn't stand a chance. He was going to shoot at the terrorists through the window, but he understood that would just be drawing fire. And if anything happened to him, who would look after the girls? So he cut his losses, went back into the safe room, closed the door, got down on one knee, lifted his weapon, and waited. The next person to enter that room was going to get a bullet. And he told my older granddaughter, the 8-year-old, I can't hear anything, because he'd shot the gun and it tore his eardrums. He was bleeding from the ears. So he told her, If you hear the terrorists coming back, you have to tell me if you hear Arabic again. So that weight, that responsibility for her whole family was on her 8-year-old shoulders. What you're going to see now is a picture of my son-in-law, and you're going to hear 3 phone calls that he sent out to the first responders group. It has subtitles on the bottom. And if you look really closely behind his shoulder, you'll see the girls under the bed.
תשלחו כוחות אליי הביתה דחוף. דחוף, 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 לשכונה שלי דחוף. נטרלתי מחבל אחד דחוף לשכונה שלי, מי שאפשר. היה לי מחבל בבית אחד, הרגתי אותו, מוכן לעוד.
Earlier that morning, before 7, before we understood that there were terrorists in the country, we had a conversation. I had a conversation with other English teachers through our WhatsApp group, and we're writing to each other and saying, what's going on? This is such a heavy barrage. We all live in the Western Negev, in communities along the border. And my friend Judy from Niroz sent a picture. And in that picture, you could see the fields, you could see the skies. About an hour later, we understood from that she was on her sunrise walk. She and her husband weren't too tired to get up at 5:30 in the morning like I was. So they had gone out for their walk behind Kibbutz Niroz in the fields between Niroz and Gaza. About an hour later, somebody asked in the WhatsApp group, has anybody heard anything from Judy? And we hadn't. So I tried calling her. There was no answer. Tried calling Gadi, her husband. There was no answer. A little bit later that day, we were told that they were missing. And about a day later, after I was already in Eilat, so it must have been 2 days later, I wrote to her, one of her daughters, who had been my student in high school, and I said, you know, I have a picture that your mom sent from really early on, about 10 to 7 in the morning. She said, send it to me. Maybe from the picture we'll be able to understand where they were. So I went back into the WhatsApp group and I realized it wasn't a picture. It was a clip. And that clip, you can see the fields, you see the sky, you see the birds flying in the sky, you hear incoming rocket warnings in the distance, and you hear Gadi and Judy whispering to each other, what's going on? What's happening? So what you're going to see now is that clip. You won't see anything graphic, but what you will hear is a conversation that Judy had with Esther. A little bit after Judy sent us that clip, they were shot at by the terrorists. She tried calling up Aryeh, who was the nurse in Kibbutz Niroz, asking him to bring an ambulance out to get them because Gadi had been shot. But by this time, the ambulance on Niroz had been neutralized. Aryeh certainly couldn't leave his house, so he passed the call on to Esther from Magen David Adom, a paramedic, someplace in the country. What you will hear will be graphic descriptions in the conversation between Judy and Esther.
תשלחו כוחות אליי הביתה דחוף.
הלו? הלו? שלום, מדברת אסתר ממד"א. אריה דיבר איתנו, אמר שאת נפגעתם מטיל. כן, זה בעיה. איפה אתם נמצאים? איפה אתם נמצאים? מחוץ לקיבוץ. מחוץ לקיבוץ? כן, בכיוון עזה, בשביל על יד השדות שלנו. אוקיי, בסדר. מי נפגע? בעלי נראה לי מת ואני נפגעתי בפנים. בעלך נראה לך מת? כן, פליז תעזרי לנו. תקשיבו, אנחנו בדרך עם הצבא. תגידי לי, הוא בהכרה? אני לא יודעת, הוא נמצא לידך? כן, הוא פנים למטה עם חלקים של המוח שלו חוץ מהראש, הכל בדם. הבנתי. ירו בכם טיל או שירו בכם עם נשק? נשק, היו חבר'ה באופנוע. היה מחבלים שירו עליכם עם נשק? כן. הבנתי. ירו בו בראש? כן, ירו בנו. הבנתי. את כרגע נמצאת במקום בטוח? לא, בחוץ, לא, מתחת עץ, על יד הכביש. תגידי, יש שם עדיין מחבלים? כרגע לא. כרגע לא. תקשיבי, אני רוצה בבקשה שתשמרי על עצמך, בסדר? אני מסתדר. כמה שאפשר, בסדר? תגידי לי, הוא לא בהכרה, הוא לא מגיב, נכון? את לא נמצאת לידו כרגע. הוא לא מגיב. הבנתי, הם מחבלים כבר לא במקום. נכון. הבנתי, מאיפה הם ירו? את ראית את זה? את ראית מאיפה הם ירו? כן, הם באו על הכביש. היו הרבה אופנועים עם נשק חי, וירו בנו. שכבנו והפערו לי בפנים וביד. את גם, ירו בך גם? כן, אני כואב. איפה ירו בך? ביד. בפנים וביד. הבנתי, בסדר. אנחנו בדרך. לבינתיים תשמרי על עצמך, בסדר? אני מסתדר. אנחנו בדרך.
Judy was a friend of mine for decades, a colleague for decades. She was an English teacher. She taught mindfulness. When we thought that they'd been kidnapped live, I imagined Judy in the tunnels doing mindfulness exercises, activities with other people from Niroz that she'd been captured with. Judy and Gadi were murdered that day. Their bodies were stolen to Gaza for ransom. The IDF eventually found their bodies last spring and brought them home for burial. And I was an English teacher for 38 years in the school system here. It's a small region. I don't know if you can see, can you see the book that I'm showing?
Because you have your background on blur, it's also blurring the...
Right. So, as I said, I've been abroad 8 times to tell my stories. And every time I go, I would say, I lost more people that I knew personally that day than I can even count. And on one of the delegations, somebody who was with me said, try to count. So I sat down and I made I'm going to unblur here. And I made a list of all the people that I knew who that day were murdered or kidnapped, or both, people that I knew personally, people who for me were more than a picture and a name on a poster, people whose voices I would recognize if they spoke, people who I knew how they took their coffee, people who were in my yoga class. And Judy was one of them. On Kibbutz Nirim, at 1:30 in the afternoon, the first soldiers arrived, 7 hours after this nightmare began. And they went right away to a house where there was a 10-day-old baby in the safe room, and the house was on fire. From 1:30, they started going house to house, rescuing who they could, bringing out each family separately, accompanying us to a central place on the kibbutz where we were surrounded by soldiers that could protect us. They arrived at my house finally, at 5:15 in the afternoon. We were in the safe room for 11 hours, waiting to die, waiting for terrorists to burst into that room at any minute. On October 7th, 2023, 6,000 terrorists invaded. 3,800 of them were the trained Nukhba. The rest were just your everyday Muhammad on the street, who they called up and said, we've conquered the kibbutzim, we've conquered the villages. Come over, steal what you want, rape who you want, murder who you want, kidnap who you want. And they did, with glee. 119 breaches over a space of 37 miles altogether, 251 kidnapped, approximately 1,200 slaughtered. If you compare it to July 7th in the UK, it's comparable to 139 July 7th. Or if you compare it to September 11th, it's comparable to 13 9/11s. So my kibbutz was considered a red community. 5 people were kidnapped, 5 people were slaughtered, 30 buildings destroyed, 45 severely damaged, and of course, emotional and psychological trauma was rife among all of us. The people on the top of the people that were kidnapped from Kibbutz Nirim that day, Hannah Perry and her son Nadav, were kidnapped from their home just a few houses away from me. Ro'i Popovel on the bottom is her other son who was murdered. His body was found outside the house holding a hoe. He had tried to go and help his friends, protect his friends with a garden tool. Nahora was a visitor that day. She and her partner Gidon were visiting Doron's family. Doron and his daughter Mor were murdered in their house. Nahora was kidnapped, while Gidon, who thought he could get away in time, had taken his suitcase, started putting it in the trunk of his car when he was incinerated by an RPG. Yegev and Rimon, a young married couple, were kidnapped. Oran Al-Fassi was doing what he was supposed to. He was sitting in the safe room with his girlfriend who he was visiting, pulling down on that handle when the terrorists shot through the door and wounded him. He could have survived, but it took so long for the army to get there that he bled to death. In November 2023, Hannah, Nahora, and Rimon, the 3 women, were released in the first ceasefire that there was. Yegev and Nadav were not. The both of them were executed in the tunnels in February 2024. Their bodies were eventually retrieved and brought back to Kibbutz Nirim to be buried in the summer of 2024. So we brought them back home, not as we'd hoped, but we brought them home. So we faced a lot of challenges. Aside from the existential threat to our lives that day, our community faced an existential threat. We were dispersed among different neighborhoods in Beersheba, and preserving community unity was a major challenge. And as I said before, the community builds resilience. If we knew that if we didn't build community, when we were eventually able to come back home, if we didn't work on community, we wouldn't have a community to come back home with. I'm going to skip through this for purposes of time concerns. This is what the kibbutz, the western neighborhood of the kibbutz, looked like on October 6th. And this is what it looked like after October 7th. as a community, we decided that we did not want to preserve any of the burnt houses. We wanted to get it down and start building as soon as possible. Erev Tisha B'Av, 2024, the first bulldozers entered that neighborhood and started taking down the houses. We have lots of projects ahead because if you don't dream, then you don't have a future. I'm going to skip through this. Today, 844 days later, the first day that we have 0 hostages in Gaza. And this is what that whole neighborhood of burnt homes looks like today. There are houses there. We're going to be planting grass here, and I figure within a month or 2, people will be living in these homes. Rosh Hashanah this year, September 2025, our community, throughout the summer, our community came back home. 87% of our community have returned. And this picture is from Rosh Hashanah in September, celebrating Rosh Hashanah in our community, in Kibbutz Nirim. And yesterday, of course, when they brought Ran Gvili's body home, making him the last hostage to come home, I made this clip, getting rid of all of my hostage family forum paraphernalia, all of the yellow ribbons, all of the flags. So happy to be able to put this behind me as much as I could, to some extent. And as I said, I wasn't able to go into the hospital and to put my red nose on for all this time because I felt that it would be disrespectful to those still in the terror tunnels of Gaza. Yesterday morning, friends of mine convinced me to come to Barzilai to put on the red nose. And I did. I felt a little guilty doing it. I had my number on my shirt underneath my costume, but I went. And it felt so good. And hours later, we got word that the last hostage was home, that October 7th, 2023 was finally finished. And the last thing I'm going to tell you is about my daughter. My daughter evacuated at first to Eilat, but then she moved with my 3 grandchildren to Kibbutz Ruchama because she felt that she needed to be on a kibbutz in a familiar situation, in a familiar atmosphere for the girls to be able to start healing. I was on a trip to the States to tell our stories for the JNF, late November, early December. And as I was in the car on my way to celebrate Thanksgiving with my family for the first time in over 50 years, I opened the Facebook and saw something that my daughter had posted. Now, my 2 older granddaughters who you see here, who are now 8 and 10, around early November, told their parents they want to come back to Eshkol, the regional council where Nirim is, to go to school here. They want to come back to Kibbutz Nirim to be here with their friends. Their father was already living here. He'd been here, living here full-time since the summer. This is what she wrote. I've translated the post that she wrote on November 27th. After 2 years in exile, the girls asked to return to Nirim to be schooled and educated with their childhood friends. It was one of the hardest decisions I had to make. I consulted with a psychologist who's been accompanying us, and she told me that one of the most important things for them at this age is to be with the herd to which they belonged. She said they understand that in Nirim, the herd is in their color. Today, the girls and I traveled there to be together with Alon, their father, at an appreciation event for the first responder squad. I stood there, looked around, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt that I was in the color of my herd. It's the same herd that cried out with me from the safe room, the herd that, like me, arrived in shock to Eilat, and whose life mission was to figure out how to rise again. The same herd that for 2 years lived in a home that wasn't theirs, a herd that speaks of the power of community. This is my herd, and for these few hours, I didn't feel like an outsider, and I didn't feel alone. I belonged, and I was loved. And for a moment, I received a dose of that rare medicine for my aching heart. So my granddaughters are now living back on Nirim, and my daughter is coming back too. She's just waiting for a house to be freed up for her to be able to move into, which is why I'm on this Zoom with you. And she is sleeping in my safe room with the 3 girls. Something that I didn't even dare dream of before this past November, that she would ever come back to Nirim. So I want to thank you for listening, for hosting me. Now you have one more story that you've heard, actually 3. And now it's your job to share these stories and the stories that you'll be able to see on Edut 710 onwards, because the denial is rife, and it's evil, and it's poisonous, and we have to fight it tooth and nail with everything that we have.
I'm a little bit speechless, Adele. Thank you, first of all, for sharing this. And again, I know how traumatic it is for me to just listen. I can only imagine what it's like to share. But what I appreciate among all of it is that just like every story of Israel, of every story of the Jewish people, it always ends with Hatikva, right? Everything, no matter what we endure, the one thing that they can never, I mean, the many things they can never steal from us, but is this enduring hope and this faith that in the end we always rise higher than we could ever be cut down. I think about this this Indian or Native American saying that says they thought that they had buried us. They didn't know that we were seeds. And it gives me the chills to watch you talk, but also for you to show how your kibbutz has come back to rebuild stronger than before. And, you know, listening to this testimony from the comfort of my home in Los Angeles, California, you know, I keep thinking, did you ever have any apprehensions about living so close to the border? And you can answer that in a moment if you wish to. But I think the overall message when we come back to the youngest generations is that this is home. And that Gaza envelope is an integral part of the heart and soul of Eretz Israel, and yet it's a completely different experience than, say, someone in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem is going to live within the same very, very, very tiny state. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that about your personal, I know that you have chosen in that this is your heart and this is your soul, and it seems like there's no question that you would want to live there, but at any point, did this strike you as maybe you'd want to live somewhere else, maybe safer, maybe even where you could get 30 seconds before going to a safe room?
So moving back has been a challenge for everybody. It's not quiet here. It's still not quiet here. And there are times when the windows reverberate from explosions that are happening just on the other side of the border from here. The plan was for the community to come back at the beginning of the summer. July 1st was summer camp, and we didn't have place to do it in Beersheba. So everybody knew that if they wanted their kids in the framework of Nirim's of the summer camp, their kids had to be here. And parents were worried about that, because thinking about bringing children back to something that's so close still to a war zone. We don't get incoming rockets anymore because the IDF are in there still. But as I said, there are horrendous explosions that just shake you. And in the summer, it was even more. The fighting was even more intense. Until the Iranians started shooting ballistic missiles, and they started exploding in Beersheba. That happened on Friday. Mm-hmm. Saturday afternoon, the pool here was full. So the families that were so hesitant about coming back realized that all of a sudden, ironically, Nirim, a mile away from the border with the Gaza Strip, is the safe place in this country. So this is a small country. Every area of the country gets its turn at being affected by terror. So when people would ask me, why do you live so close to the border? I'd say, okay, I can move to Beersheba, but here they get ballistic rockets. Tel Aviv got rockets. Ashkelon, of course, gets rockets. Tel Aviv had years where there were buses exploding. Right. Jerusalem, knifings and rammings. And up north, the rockets that you get from the Hezbollah. Where is it safe in this country? And where is it safe in the world? Where is it safe in the world for Jews? Can you ever get away from terror any place? So I've stopped running. You can't run from terror. So I don't run. I'm here. I'm in my home. I put my faith in my army, although they screwed up royally on October 7th. I hope and pray that they learned the lessons that need to be learned and are watching over me now. We have a bigger and stronger and more prepared community first responders group. And I put my faith in my community. So, like Dorothy said, no place like home.
And you have a lot of angels looking over you too. And for those who believe, I truly believe God. If God weren't watching over the people of Israel, there's no way we would even exist today. So I think that Israel is a land of miracles from wherever you want to imagine they come from. But they come from everywhere. And thank you so much for that. I'm going to, for a moment, come back to Itay and the project. And I'm curious, Itay, after listening to Adele's incredibly moving testimony, generally speaking, are survivors this emotionally able to tell you their whole stories? Or do you find that people in general maybe self-censor due to the trauma of potentially reliving the nightmare?
You have all kind of testimonies, and some people were willing to give testimony in the beginning. Some people did not want to give testimony back then, and now they want to give testimony. Some people felt it's either easy for them to give testimony in the beginning, but now it's more difficult for them to tell the story. So some variety of people, some are getting really emotional, some are less. So I can tell there is something that which is relevant to all testimonies. I can tell.
Do you take special steps to sort of protect survivors from being re-traumatized while still like really aiming to create a testimony strong enough so the world can bear witness to what happened?
First and foremost,
I'm thinking specifically of like rape victims, for example, that it's so hard in any circumstance for them to speak up, and yet people need to know. Where's the balance?
so we're not interrogating, and we're not journalists. We're listeners. We don't even call ourselves interviewers.
Okay.
We are listeners. So we invite people to tell the story, and they decide what are they telling and what are their boundaries and what they want to tell and what they're not. We're not digging into the testimony, and we're not digging into the story. And we tell them in the beginning where they have fully control of the testimony. We're not trying to get to the details that they don't want to share.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing. So they have control, because in terror attack you lose control. So we give them back the control on the story. They construct the story, they get recognition in the story, and they decide which part to tell and which one not. The second thing, we try now. We're cautious, but not. We don't have to be cautious as we were in the beginning, but we won't be the first person to come to the survivors to listen to the stories. I mean, we want them to be strong enough to give the testimony. In some cases, we'll have social workers or psychologists on the set. We trained our teams. We had a lot of training with a lot of psychologists and social workers. So we give them the tools, I believe, to support the testifiers. But for some people, maybe even many people, testifying, giving the testimony is not easy. And sometimes it has an effect on the next day, the following days, but they still understand it's very important for them to have it on tape, and for their family and for the community and for future generations. So they're willing to do the process of testimony in order to keep it for the future. As some of the testifiers told me, and one of the survivors, he told me, I'm using you. I won't remember in 20 years from now what exactly happened. Now I put it on tape, and I'll be able to go and watch it again. We're now in a process during November 23, we made a project in David Hotel in Yam HaMelach, in the Dead Sea, with Be'eri. And we took in November 23, more than 180 testimonies of the communities, and for the community, for Be'eri. And now we're having the testimony that we're getting them from the kibbutz, and people get to see again the testimony that they gave 1 month after the event, or few weeks after the event. And the comments and the reactions that we get are really, really amazing. I mean, how important it was to do it back then. So, and some people, they don't want to give testimony. That's fine. We're not pushing them. We're here for them when they will be ready to give the testimony.
Yeah. Adele, when you see people denying the atrocities of October 7th, the atrocities that you actually lived through with your friends and family, how does that hit you?
I'm very active on social media, trying to fight anti-Semitism with a group of people that are posting things on all sorts of different Facebook groups that are not necessarily supportive of Israel. And I try to answer as best I can when people come out and deny it. I tell them, you can't tell me it didn't happen. I lived it. But there's a limit to how much you can just try and argue with idiots.
But beyond the arguing, how does it make you feel when people like deny your lived experience?
I knew it was going to happen. It was happening before. I've been active on social media way before that, dealing with anti-Semitism on social media. It did not surprise me at all. What surprised me is that it took so long to start happening.
Minutes?
Hours? A week. I mean, it didn't. What surprised me was the governments. I wasn't surprised by the responses of people, but all of a sudden the governments that were like, oh no, we don't, this is not PC, and politicians are worried about their seats, so they're not going to speak up against it. All these influencers that all of a sudden are jumping on the bandwagon. And
so I guess it leads me to the question, has the world forgotten the lessons of the Holocaust, or did they ever learn them at all?
I'll doubt if it was ever learned. And I'm also a teacher, and also Adele was a teacher. I think education is a constant struggle. It's not, you can never rest. You have to do it again and again and again and again and again. The memory is fading away, and always there are challenges. So you just have to do what you do and do it better, do it more, have more people do what the right things to do. But unfortunately, terror attacks are happening in many places in the world. I mean, we are sensitive. It happened in Israel, but we have to remember that in Syria, in Congo, in Africa, genocide is happening in some other parts of the world as well. And as human beings, we don't do enough.
The people who are denying this, the people who are disbelieving, the people who are spreading their anti-Semitism, and the people who are not, the people who you would think are normal, Western brought up people who were born in a democracy, who were born where we were and grew up the way we did, are looking through this whole conflict through the prism of Western glasses. And they don't understand they simplify it and see oppressor oppressed, black and white. They don't understand that there's nuance. They don't understand that there's history that they don't know about. And just because they don't know about it doesn't mean it didn't exist. And I think in all of my visits, in all of my tours, the hardest part for me was in this last visit that I went on, when I sat with friends who live in New York, people I grew up with who were saying, but now Israel are the stronger ones, and the poor Palestinians are dying, and now it's like people are saying, can't you just go and make peace and just be friends and help them, and that'll solve everything. And that was the hardest thing for me. It was so important to me to try and make an impression on them on the fact that this is a very complicated situation that can't be understood the way they're looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I succeeded in that. And
And
that broke my heart. It really did.
unfortunately, human beings are looking for black and white and for good and bad and the vision, like a clear-cut division of things in the world. And the reality is much more complicated in general, and the lives usually are on the gray part in between the black and white. And again, social media is simplifying things when it's we're facing really, really challenging times, and our governments overall has to wake up and regulate much more social media and AI and so. Otherwise, we're in a jungle of information
And
who knows how
disinformation.
and disinformation. Yeah.
Ken. Okay. Because you've been extremely generous with your time. I want to sort of wrap up this conversation first by asking you, Itay, how can people support Edut 710, both as donors and potentially as volunteers, or how best to support you?
So first of all, I would say that I'll say that Adele's story is one of 10,000 stories. In the West Negev, there were about 70,000 people living there. And our mission is to collect these stories, and we can't bring Adele to every community in the world and every house in the world only by herself. And that's the advantage of our archive and website, which brings these stories, hundreds of stories, from different point of views and different angles. You can relate to young people, to older people, to female, to male, to people who likes animal and mention animals and pets in the testimony, or people who are, heroism testimony. So there is everyone can find something in the archive, and that's one important thing. And then if you are willing to support us in continue taking testimonies and make them accessible to the public and translate it to English, in our website, you have a contribution bottom, which you can contribute. If you want to have a 501c3 permit, we have friends of Edut in the States, so you have to mail us and we'll send you all the details. And of course, if you want to volunteer, there is a form in the website that you can contact us, and we'll be happy. I can also put our link, I don't know, in the YouTube when or wherever you put. We can also share our links. But basically, you can communicate with us through the website.
Can people volunteer?
Edut710 en.org.
Can people volunteer from abroad, from the diaspora? Yes.
Yes, we can. I mean, all organization is an online organization. We have volunteers from the States, from Australia, from other places. You can volunteer as video editor if you understand Hebrew, or a translator if you understand. Again, you have to mostly to understand Hebrew.
Got it.
But you can also help us market. You can help us with social media in English. There are many things you can support us with.
Thank you. Adele, how can people support Kibbutz Nirim, both as donors and volunteers?
So they can donate to Kibbutz Nirim if they're so disposed to. I believe I sent you a link. But the most important thing, I think, is for, as Itay said, for people to get educated, read, listen, watch, go on to Edut 710, which, by the way, seems to be down, Itay. I
Check
just
it
tried
out.
to go into the English website, and there's a problem, but I'm sure they'll deal with that quickly. Read people's books. There are so many stories that are coming out now. My daughter is writing a book. It's been part of her process of healing, and she's coming out with a book, and I'm going to be translating it. There's Eli Sharabi's book. There's so many books that are coming out. So many witness stories that are survival stories that are being told. Get educated, learn about history, learn about the history of Israel so that you can know what to say to people when they say this all started in 1948 when the white colonists, Jewish white colonizers decided to come to Israel. Education, that's the key. It's truly the key.
Thank you. My last question before we sign off, and it's for both of you. What do the words Am Yisrael Chai mean to you?
Adele?
So, if what happened yesterday by retrieving Rani Gvili's body with so many soldiers that were in there throughout the war, so many soldiers went in to risk their lives to bring people home. If that doesn't exemplify Am Yisrael Chai, I don't know what does. And like I always like to say when I make clips, Am Yisrael Chai, whether you like it or not.
I like it. Itay?
I think it's the solidarity so many civilians came up to do and to act and to take action during October 7 and since then, not only in Israel, also we owe a lot to American Jewry. I think we couldn't pass these 2 years without the support of American Jewry. So I think it's much wider than Israel. And it's the solidarity when you go around the world and you know that if there is a Bet Chabad or if there's a Hebrew house, you're more invited. And I think we feel it when we go out. That's the solidarity for me.
And people like you, Shana, who are elevating our voices. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I always say that Am Yisrael isn't something that only lives within the land of Israel. It's the nation of Israel, and that includes everybody in the diaspora as well. We have a heart that beats together and a soul that's intertwined forever together. And it's my pleasure and my honor to be able to dedicate these last years to Am Yisrael. And that being said, Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.